Well, they had the perfect marriage. It was the one where he delighted in her and she so delighted in him. They just felt like they were made for one another. They felt comfortable and safe around each other. They really felt like they knew each other and came to know each other better every single day that they had together. They spent a lot of time together. They explored together. They took adventures together. There was deep attraction between the two of them. And that relationship that began so well, a relationship of great promise, unfortunately, like a number of other relationships, actually led to great frustration. Unfortunately, over time, in fact, really a pretty short amount of time, barriers grew where once there was closeness and there was intimacy. They began to blame one another and point fingers at one another, and there was bickering, and it intensified. They grew distant. They grew distant between one another. They grew distant in the relationship with God. There just wasn't the closeness that there was before. In fact, there was deep frustration. There was hurt. There was brokenness. In fact, I think a lot of you actually know the couple. His name was Adam. Her name was Eve. What began so wonderful and beautiful and perfect, everything about it was perfect, soon led to such heartbreak. Adam and Eve, they were the pinnacle of God's work. They were the last of His creation. The reason for that is because He created everything else so that they were the pinnacle of His work, so that they could enjoy all that He created. They could explore together. They could go on adventures together. I mean, imagine being handed paradise. It was like being a 15-year-old getting the keys of a Maserati. It was at their disposal. Everything their hearts could ever fathom or dream of to be explored, to go on ventures together, mountains to climb. The mountains had never been climbed before. The seas had not yet been sailed. No one had written a song. No one had put a novel to paper. No one had penned those beautiful words. It all was just waiting for them to explore and to enjoy with one another. No one had yet discovered that strawberries make wonderful jam. And as John and Stacy Eldridge wrote, they said, someone had not yet figured out that you could milk a cow. And once you milk the cow, you can let it sit. And then you can skim the cream off the top. And then you can put it in your coffee and it tastes real good. No one had even experienced that yet because it was theirs to explore and to enjoy together and to take on this life. But John Eldridge says there was something that was more important than adventure. There was something more important than exploration that they were able to do together. And here's what he says. John Eldridge says this: the highest of all adventures are those where we find ourselves partnering together for a cause. When God gave us the earth, He gave us a mission. What John is saying is that when God created a man and a woman, a husband and his wife, and He brought them together, the highest calling, the greatest good, wasn't that they could just go on adventures together, but it was that they had a mission together. I don't know if you've thought about, if you're in a marriage relationship, whether your marriage is on mission or not, but I think that's a pretty important thing to think about. In fact, look at this text in Genesis chapter 1, 26 through 28, when we go back to the very beginning of the creation of man and woman. And God says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. God blessed them. And He said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And so God gives them a mission, and it's a lot more than farming and fishery. That's not really what it's all about. God speaks to them, both man and woman, husband and wife. They both have this mission that they're to do together. You know, oftentimes when we think of like mission or calling, we often think of things that are an individual calling. Like, you know, I was called to medicine, or I was called to service, to serve people or to care for people. I was called to ministry. I was called to missions. And oftentimes we think of kind of a personal calling, but we see here in Genesis that there is this together calling that God calls both Adam and Eve to come into this mission together. It's not an individual calling, it's a together calling. It's a calling for husband and wife. It's a calling for our marriages. That's what he's talking about here, that they were created to bear the image of God. They were to represent God's image to this world. And they were given a mission by God to rule over this earth and to subdue it. They were to work. This was representative rule. God is the master, the owner. They were the stewards who were to be caretakers for God. And even says to them, they were also to multiply and be fruitful on the earth. They were to grow a family. This was the mission of a husband and a wife. That means even in marriage, there's a purpose for us in which children are a part of that beautiful purpose and plan. In Genesis, we read in chapter 2, verse 18, the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him." We were never intended to go through life alone. And God says, I'm going to make a helper. Now, when you see the word helper here, don't think, when you think of the wife as a helper, don't think clean socks and pot roast on Sundays. That's not what we're talking about. When he says helper, it's actually a word used of God, how he is our helper. He's everything that we need. In other words, this is it's a word used of God multiple times throughout the Old Testament. He's a helper. In other words, this is someone that man needed. He was not to do this alone. He was to do this with someone else. This was a couple on a mission. This is about a mission and a couple, and God is making something very clear. You are in this together. You have a mission that you cannot fulfill without each other. You can't do this on your own. This is something that you do together. Marriage is a powerful relationship in which you are better together than you are apart. This is what God is revealing to us. In a true marriage, which is what we're talking about right now these few weeks as we talk about marriage, God's purpose for marriage. A true marriage is to be mission-driven. Now, maybe you're here today and you're like, you know what? I'm not married, so, grocery list. This doesn't apply to me. Well, first of all, what we're going to talk about, what we're going to share right now about marriage is definitely something that you want to know and you want to help others know. It does matter to you. But I also want you to know that if you're single and you're saying, man, if we're going to talk about, mission and marriage, that's not my situation right now, then I want you to look at everything we're talking about just from a different context, because it does apply to this as well. I want you to think of the things we talk about today from the perspective of you and the bride of Christ, you and the church. Think of it in those terms. We are better together. This is true in the church, just as it is in our marriage relationships. I want you to think about it from that perspective. We are better together. We must be on mission together. And the tragedy was, when we go back to the very beginning, is that Adam and Eve sinned against God because they got off mission. And they surrendered this beautiful garden to the evil one who became the prince of the power of the air. The Bible describes Satan as ruling here on earth in this kingdom where we've brought sin into this place. John chapter 40, verse 30 talks about him being the prince of this earth. The consequences are grave. When Adam and Eve got off mission, sinned against God, they brought two kinds of evil into the world that day: moral evil and natural evil. Let's leave these up here for a minute. Moral evil, natural evil. Moral evil is what happens in the hearts of free moral creatures like you, expressed through your sinful actions. Things like greed, hatred, selfishness, deceit, stealing, lust, envy. All these things are moral evil. And because of moral evil, the marriage relationship has been under attack from the very beginning. That's why Adam and Eve began to point fingers and blame one another. They, in that moment, dealt with conflict, separation, brokenness, pain, hurt. It entered in. instead of harmony in relationships, automatically that began to be destroyed from that very moment on. We see that marriage is frequently subverted through polygamy and divorce and sexual morality, adultery, homosexuality, sterility, and the dilution of gender roles. It's happening all throughout the Old Testament as examples of what happens when a marriage is not on mission for God, when a marriage is not surrendered to His lordship. Instead of loving harmony, there's destruction. And what God even says part of the curse is going to be is that a man will lord it over his wife. He's not going to treat her like the fine china that God created her to be treated. He's not going to treasure her the way he should treasure her. That's part of the curse that we see in the world all around us. And he says that for the woman, she's not going to respect her husband or submit to his leadership in their home. She's going to usurp that role. That's going to be her tendency. There's going to be this struggle, this fight, this conflict between a man and his wife. From the very beginning, God warned it would be like this because of moral evil. And we see it all the time in our relationships. And then on that day, they brought natural evil into the world. And natural evil is sometimes called physical evil, and it originates from the natural processes of a fallen world. Things like genetic defects, diseases, insanity, famine, suffering, death, natural events like floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, suffering, death. All of that is because of natural evil. And every single one of us is impacted by this. It affects us in great ways. Romans 8 says that the whole cosmos is plunged into a state of corruption. Instead of being man's servant, the earth has become our antagonist. When God said subdue and rule over the earth, it was a lot easier until sin came. Once sin came and there's thorns and thistles, it just fights against us. Work becomes hard. Sometimes it's too much, it's oppressive, it's difficult. Instead of perpetuating man's life indefinitely with the tree of life, now because of sin and death, man's body is engorged with the earth's dusty maw, as Jack Cottrell described. The entire universe is undergoing a process of decay. Everything is in decay. The law of entropy is at work. It's made it harder to be stewards of what God has given us. Moral evil, natural evil, brokenness, pain. It came because they lost sight of their mission and they lost sight of God, which is why Jesus came to earth. Jesus came to earth to invade the realm of Satan. Jesus came to earth. God put on flesh so that he could defeat that prince of the earth. He invaded. That's what Christianity is. It's invading the realm of Satan. It's invading the realm of darkness. And that's what Jesus came as his mission. And we, husband and wife, are to be on mission together. It's now more grave than it's ever been before. It's more urgent than it's ever been before. We must be on mission to help bring God's kingdom into a dark place. Never has it been more important for couples to be on mission together than it is now. Too many Christians have this idea that we're in a waiting game, that we're just waiting for Jesus to come back. When we all get to heaven, we're just waiting for that to happen. Instead of doing what God has called us to do, which is to get on mission together. Adam and Eve were called to do that, and they gave it up. And I think a lot of times in our marriages, we're called to do that, but some people give it up, and they're just not on mission for God. And that thunder is proof of that. It's like, yes, it's true. Look what Jesus said. He said, as the Father has sent me, I send you. As the Father sent me, Jesus, so I'm sending you. We are on mission together for the cause of Christ. And it's urgent. Some of us, we haven't thought about our marriage as a mission beyond raising children and making a better home. And while that may be part of the mission, if your mission is your children, you've got a problem. First of all, it sends the wrong message, both to them and to your spouse, because you want your children to witness you as a husband and as a wife being on mission for God, a part of his larger story where you're capturing greater things, where you're fighting bigger battles, you're fighting against the kingdom of darkness so that they can learn to do the same. We want to be on mission for God. There is this difficult mindset that we've got to dislodge in a lot of our homes today, and it's the idea that the goal of marriage is to have a happy marriage in this cute little home that you've built together. That's not the goal of marriage. It's not the mission of marriage. Home improvement stores, home improvement shows. Couples spend their best days dreaming about how they can have a nicer place to live. They're dreaming about shiplap, but they're not dreaming about the kingdom advancing. You know what I mean? We're dreaming about shiplap, but we're not dreaming about advancing the kingdom against the kingdom of darkness. We're not dreaming about big things. We're dreaming about little things. A beautiful spouse in a beautiful house. That is not the right mission for your marriage. That mission is too self-centered. That mission is too inwardly turned. God created you to live a shared mission together. And maybe two questions you could just ask yourselves today that might help you think about whether your marriage, if you're in a marriage relationship, could be on mission for God. First of all, I think the first question is, ask God, God, what do you have for us? What do you have for us? What are you calling us to? Not me, but us. What are you calling us to as a husband and as a wife? What is the mission that you have for us? Ask Him to reveal it to you. And I think a second question you could probably ask is, ask God, what are we involved in right now that we shouldn't be, that's taking us off mission, that's distracting us from a better mission, distracting us from a life that could be lived for the kingdom purposes? God, what shouldn't we be doing that we're doing? And God, what would you have for us to do? Just asking the question would be inviting a conversation in your relationship that maybe you haven't had for a while. God, what would you have for us? You see, there's some reasons I think you should prioritize a mission-driven marriage. And first reason I want to mention is this, is because we serve better together. When you're in a marriage relationship, you serve better together. When you're intentionally on mission together, some of your best shared experiences are going to be when you serve together. When you use your gifts and your personalities and your abilities, which are very different, that complement one another, to serve together. There's a story that John and Stacey Eldridge tell of this young lady. It was a dear friend to both of them. And she called them one evening while they were sitting at home, and she called them because she was in a mental struggle. She was battling the kingdom of darkness. She was battling these thoughts in her head. She was dealing with depression. She was dealing with anxiety. She was just dealing with these evil thoughts about herself, and she was not winning the battle. She was losing the battle in her mind. And because they were dear friends of hers, she called them and asked if, hate to intrude, but just asked if they would come over. And John and Stacey got up from what they were doing. She was folding underwear, and he was doing a Sudoku. He was doing a puzzle. And anyway, doing the puzzle thing. And so they left. And they went to her house immediately. They cared for her greatly. And there they found just the oppression in that house. You could just feel it. It's just a place of darkness, and just her countenance, how low and dark it was. And they realized this is going to be some serious prayer. This isn't prayer like, dear God, thank you for this day. This is the kind of prayer where you're battling. You're battling against the spiritual forces of darkness and evil. And so they were just praying with her and talking with her and sharing with her and letting her think on Scripture so she could think good thoughts, not the thoughts that she had. And they just battled with her for a couple hours, praying with her throughout the evening. And they said you could just sense in the room her countenance changed, and the darkness fled, and the place was filled with the Spirit of God. And there, as they did battle together and loved on one another and loved on her until she was in a place where she was good, they left. And on the drive home, they just described it as we were just like, yes! Like they just fought a battle together, and they were victorious, and there was conquering, and they did something significant. And their friend just kept apologizing. I'm so sorry you had to come over here. She already felt bad enough already, heaping more guilt. They're like, no, she didn't understand. What she gave us was a gift. We were folding underwear, and now we were battling the spiritual forces of darkness. And I want you just to think about that in your own relationships. That what they go on to say is, we need that on a consistent basis in our marriages. We need to feel like we're battling something a little bigger than each other, and what we leave out on the counter, and what we didn't pick up that we wish someone had picked up. We need to fight the big battles together. And you do that by serving alongside one another. I think there's some great examples in scriptures of couples who did this. Let me give you one. Priscilla and Aquila. Priscilla and Aquila are only mentioned 6 times in the Bible. We find them in the book of Acts, 1 Corinthians, 2 Timothy, and in Romans 16. But every single time they're mentioned together. Priscilla and Aquila. They did ministry together. They served together. In fact, in Romans 16, Paul tells the Romans, Christians, to greet them. And he says, greet them, Priscilla and Aquila, because they risked their lives for me. They did. They risked their lives for me, he says. He goes on to tell them, all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. In other words, they helped advance the gospel to the Gentile believers, and they're grateful to them for that partnership. He talked about how they both taught Apollos. Apollos was a first century evangelist, and they taught him even deeper in the truths of baptism and things like that so that he could be speaking more accurately. They did that together. Paul tells the Romans that they are to greet them because, and to greet the church that meets in their home. So they had a house church. They were facilitating a church. Husband and wife on mission with God, serving the Lord together. They were leaders in that church. They were united in mission, bringing their own gifts and their own complementary personalities to improve and strengthen what God was doing. They were serving together. What a beautiful picture that God would like to have happen in your relationships. I want you just to think about that. What could you do together? It doesn't mean you always have to be like in the same room doing ministry together, but it can be that. It's not uncommon for me when I go to Decision Point to peek into the nurseries, and because I like looking at all the little kiddos in there and see a husband and wife serving together. It's not uncommon to see that in our church. We see husband and wives who serve communion together. They serve by facilitating a small group together. They serve in children's ministry together. It's a place to intersect. I think of other couples. I think of Ken and Joyce Eddy, who have a huge heart for international students. And they welcome them into their home year after year after year. They build relationships with them. They grow so close to them. They call them their own daughters. They love on them, showing God's love to them. It's significant ministry they do together. They have a common mission. I think of Ken and Carol Bryant, whose own marriage was healed after experiencing a crisis in their own life and in their own marriage, and through their own journey of hurt and pain and brokenness, they then moved into a ministry of helping other couples who are in marriage crisis of their own. It was born out of their own pain, but they're serving together on mission together. I think of Corey and Krista Thompson in our church, and the ministries that they're now involved in together. Some of that born out of their own pain and heartbreaking loss. When they lost their little baby girl, Camry, who was born with trisomy 13 and passed away, they then got involved with On Angels' Wings, that for other families who have diagnosis of at-risk pregnancies where maybe the child's not expected to live, they come in and they take pictures of those moments that a parent and their child may have together. Even if it's the final moments, it's a ministry to them. I remember at one time they even had recorded the heartbeat of their child in womb when it applied. And so they could have that and maybe put it inside a bear or something like that so they could listen to that heartbeat in the future. It was a ministry birthed out of their own heartbreak and pain. I think of the ministry they now have with Financial Peace University, where it helped turn their finances around, and they're now counseling and helping other people because they're in training right now to be a financial coach. To do that with other people. They're on mission together. Here's what we find in marriages that are on mission together. They serve for a common cause. And I want you to think about your marriage. Are you mission driven? Are you on mission? Because if you are, you'll serve better together, but also you'll reach better together. You will reach this world better together. Marriage is a picture of what Christ is doing in human history. And it's a primary instrument that God uses to reach others. Not just in your own home, your own family, within the own walls of your own home, but He's using it to show the world what He is like. And He uses the marriage relationship as a picture of that. In fact, He often uses marriage as His a picture of his relationship to us, where he's reconciling relationships, where there's forgiveness and grace and love and affection and partnership and mission and service and intimacy. And he uses that as a picture for the world. So like in Ephesians chapter 5, whenever the Apostle Paul is talking about the overarching purpose for humanity in Ephesians chapter 1, which is to bring all things in heaven and earth under Christ, under the head of Christ. He's the head of the church. He's the head of every authority that exists on this earth. And our mission is to bring everything under his authority, under his leadership, to reconcile everything to him. We're a part of that mission as a husband and a wife to do that. And so what he goes on to describe is that if Jesus is over it all, if he is the head, a marriage relationship should reflect that. It should show that. Jesus should be the head of the marriage, where we are submitted to his lordship, to his leading. And out of reverence for Christ, we submit to one another. We care for one another. We love one another. In fact, we're told in Ephesians 5 that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, which was to death. He's to love her with everything he has, beyond his comprehension, but he learns how to love through the love of Jesus. That's how he learns to love her the way he's called to love. And a wife is to respect her husband with a respect that she doesn't even understand how to respect him that way. But out of her reverence for Jesus, she learns how to respect him in a way that brings honor not only to him, but to God, where she's called to be submissive to her husband. Ephesians 5 describes this. And what's unfortunate is we've allowed the world to hijack that word submission to where we hear it and we're like, ooh, that's like somehow a negative connotation. We've allowed submission now to be redefined. When we hear the word submission, we think of things like slavery. That's something that ought to be abolished. So then we think submission should too. Well, submission is not subservience where one person is doing the bidding of another. That's not submission. And submission is not hierarchical like a military commander, top-down chain of command where he tells a soldier to obey, and so he just obeys, no questions asked. That's not submission. That's how we think of it, but it's so distorted. The biblical model is complementary, where a husband and wife are partners and they value one another, and he loves her with the love of Christ, and she respects him in such a way that she allows him to be a spiritual leader in their home. She gives honor to him and respect to him. She has equal worth, equal personhood. In other words, Jesus is not asking her to do anything that he didn't do himself. The Bible reveals that Jesus did this with his Father. He submits to the Heavenly Father while being equal in worth, equal in personhood. That's who Jesus was. And he's calling for our marriage relationships to reflect who he is. That's what it's about. To reflect his relationship with the Father and his relationship with us. We're to look like that. So our marriages become a testimony to the gospel of Jesus. That's the whole point. That's why Paul can talk about marriage, and at times he's like, I'm really talking about Christ and the church. You're like, well, what are you talking about? The marriage or the church? He's like, yes. Because our marriage is to reflect who Jesus is and what he's trying to do in this world. We want to live lives submitted to his headship so we can relate to one another in ways that honor each other and bring glory to God and point the world to who Jesus is. That's what it looks like. Why? Because we're in a battle. We're in a spiritual battle, and Satan is trying to gain ground in your life and in your marriage and in this world. He's trying to destroy every good thing that God is creating. So we have to be on mission. We can't just be building little happy homes that look peaceful and comfortable and cute. Because shortly before Jesus went to the cross, he warned his disciples of this final battle that he was going to have with the ruler of the prince of the air, the ruler of the world. He says it's approaching. John chapter 12, 14 and 16, Jesus said this decisive battle was coming. And the decisive battle happened at the cross, when Jesus went to the cross and he paid the price for the sins of mankind. And there, as he breathed his last, Satan was gloating over it and cheering that he had destroyed and conquered and defeated Jesus on the cross, not realizing it was his own demise. That there at the cross, Jesus was canceling the code and the regulations that stood against his people. And that by paying the price with his life, He was the perfect sacrifice for the sins of the world. He was the perfect substitute for the sins of the world. Jesus took all the wrath of God on himself so that you wouldn't have to face the wrath of God. He was conquering death and conquering sin. Satan just didn't know it. And while Jesus was doing that on the cross, Jesus was also giving us a cause, a mission. A mission to take the gospel into a world that desperately needs Jesus, to heal things that are broken, to bring reconciliation to people who are divided, to make peace between God and man. Jesus came to set us free. When he raised from the tomb and he came to life, he showed a power that is able to raise us out from our own death and graves and give us life forever. Jesus delivered dominion over Satan. His power is greater than Satan. He came and crushed the head of Satan. And so he gave us a mission. In fact, even when Jesus was leaving the earth, he gave us a mission to make disciples of all nations. The stakes are high. We have to get on mission with him. And so what I want to do right now, I'm going to ask for, first of all, those of you who are married in the room, I want you just to stand to your feet right now. If you're married and you're here, I want you just to stand to your feet. And the reason you're standing to your feet right now is because I want you to know that this prayer that I'm about to pray from Ephesians chapter 3 is for you and for your marriages. It's a prayer of blessing over you, that your marriage would be mission-driven, that you would get on mission for God and begin to reflect on these things. Now I'd like for everyone else in the room to go ahead and stand to your feet, because this same prayer that I'm going to pray right now is a prayer of blessing over you. It was written for all of God's people, not just for married people. And if you're not yet married, I want you to think about how you could be on mission for God. In fact, Paul would talk about how oftentimes you can be more focused on mission because you don't have a divided attention. So let this prayer be a prayer also for you. God's blessing your life. Let's bow our heads, just close our eyes. Let this prayer just wash over you today. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled in the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever.